Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be looking at a case from October 2014, which took place in Frenchtown, Michigan. This case really highlights the near impossible task facing the police when the last sighting of the victim occurs at a party in a field attended by around 600 people. The investigation was further complicated by the fact that many of the partygoers were wearing Halloween costumes and had either consumed large amounts of alcohol or were high during the event. Frenchtown is located about half an hour south of Detroit in Michigan. It has a population of around 20,000 people and was generally seen as a safe community to live in. However, this feeling of safety was destroyed back in October 2014 after a popular Halloween party ended in the most tragic of circumstances. The Halloween party was held on the property of Mike Williams on Post Road in the Frenchtown township. It was a well-known event in the local area with a large bonfire and several live bands. 22-year-old Chelsea Bruck left her house at around 10:30 p.m. on the evening of the party, the 25th of October 2014. She was dressed as the Batman villain, Poison Ivy, wearing a homemade costume which included a top covered in green leaves, leggings and a red wig. Chelsea travelled to the party with her friend Laura Taylor and they planned to meet up with more friends at the event. When they arrived, Chelsea decided to leave her purse and mobile phone in Laura's car due to her costume not having any pockets. By the time they arrived, the party was in full swing. There were live bands, a large bonfire, and plenty of drinking and dancing. At some time around midnight, Chelsea had an accident. In the darkness of the field, she walked into a post and cut open the bridge of her nose. She cleaned herself up, laughed off the incident, and then continued to enjoy the event. More and more people were arriving at the party. It had been growing year on year, and this time was getting so large that it was starting to get out of control. People had travelled from neighbouring states to attend, and it was estimated that somewhere in the region of 600 people had shown up. At some point, Chelsea and Laura became separated. Chelsea found another friend, Rebecca, and asked to borrow her phone to text Laura. Laura had returned to her car when she received the text and told Chelsea that she was planning to leave soon after. However, Chelsea wanted to stay. Rebecca went to collect Chelsea's phone from Laura, but when she returned to the party with it, Chelsea had moved on. Eventually, assuming that Chelsea had already left, Rebecca also made her way home. The party finished up at around 7 a.m. Later that morning, Chelsea's parents realised that their daughter had not returned home and then reported her missing. As the search began, it became clear that the police have a mammoth job on their hands. They interviewed the party's host, Mike Williams, who confirmed that somewhere in the region of 600 people had been in attendance the previous night. Chelsea's last known whereabouts were at the party, in a field which was now strewn with cups, broken bottles, glasses, cans, cigarette butts, and remnants of costumes. There was mess everywhere. Whilst everyone hoped that Chelsea was at a friend's house and hadn't got around to calling her parents, the reality started to look a lot more concerning. To go missing and not make contact with her family was completely out of character for her. As hours turned into days, the police continued to interview hundreds of partygoers, but with alcohol, drugs, costumes, and darkness clouding people's recollections, many of the stories led to conflicting information and little in the way of progress for the authorities. One more reliable witness statement came from the merchandise vendor for one of the bands which had been playing that night. As this man was working, he was not in costume and had not been drinking. He said that around 3 a.m. he had spotted Chelsea walking to the car park with an unknown male who was not in costume. This man was described as white, of medium build, with medium-length dark hair, a thin moustache, and facial hair. He was wearing a black hoodie and black framed glasses. From this description, a composite sketch was produced and circulated. Chelsea's family encouraged people to share any photos that they had of Chelsea far and wide. The party had attracted people from other states, so there was no telling where Chelsea could be. Helicopters and ground search teams using all-terrain vehicles continued to search the area around where the party was held. Chelsea's family stated that her disappearance was way out of character for her, adding that, "We have no inclination that any of this is by choice on her part. We have weddings coming up for our family. She's in them and very excited about them." In a desperate attempt to find Chelsea, her family coordinated a daily volunteer search using the premises of a former Monroe Bank and Trust branch in Newport as headquarters for their efforts. As days turned to weeks, the family coordinated public appeals and fundraising events to enable them to feed volunteers and print flyers, which were sent to locations throughout the US, as well as being taped to telephone poles, windows and bulletin boards in the local area, and distributed with pizza and flower deliveries. The community wore purple ribbons in honour of Chelsea's favourite colour to keep her disappearance at the forefront of people's minds. Nevertheless, the case went cold. In January 2015, 2 people were charged with lying to investigators about Chelsea's disappearance. A 29-year-old Ohio woman claimed that her boyfriend had killed Chelsea and dumped her body in a cemetery, and a 19-year-old man from Flat Rock, Michigan, claimed that he saw 2 men harass Chelsea and drive off with her during the Halloween party. In the spring of 2015, there was a development in the case which was believed to be as a direct result of the flyers that had been circulated. The red wig that Chelsea had been wearing at the Halloween party, together with part of her top, were found at an abandoned industrial site about 15 minutes from where the party had taken place. Although these items had been protected from the elements, they still, unfortunately, yielded no clues as to how they got there. With no suspects or leads to follow up on, hope began to fade. Chelsea's family refused to give up. By this time, it is estimated that they had circulated somewhere in the region of 1.25 million flyers, and in a newspaper report on the 23rd of April 2015, Chelsea's mother, Leander, said, "Until somebody tells me otherwise, my daughter is out there waiting for someone to help her, and I will not believe otherwise." The day after this report appeared in the press, the discovery was made that everyone had been dreading. The owner of a property about 10 miles from the location of the party reported that a body had been found on their land. Workers who were moving dirt on a construction site in a heavily wooded area near some train tracks by Briar Hill Road had found naked human remains that had been partially covered in leaves and twigs, then hidden under a large log. Clumps of blonde hair, a shirt that had been decorated with green leaves, a shoe and a pair of leggings were also found nearby. The partially decomposed remains were taken to the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office for identification. Dental records confirmed that this was Chelsea. 2 samples of DNA were found on her leggings. One belonged to Chelsea, but the other was unknown. Despite potentially now having her killer's DNA, the police were still not able to identify them. Hundreds of people attended a vigil at St Joseph's Parish in Maybe on the 28th of April, and the family were able to lay Chelsea to rest at a funeral on the 13th of June. However, her killer still remained free. It would be another year before there was any further significant developments in the case. The second DNA sample, which had been found on Chelsea's leggings, was found to be a match to someone with a long criminal record who had been implicated in a separate criminal sexual conduct case. On the 22nd of July 2016, the police descended upon a mobile park home at Frenchtown Villa, the last known address of a man by the name of Daniel Clay. The home belonged to his girlfriend of around a month, Kelly Richter. Whilst the home initially appeared quiet, an officer noticed a movement at the window, and soon after, Daniel was arrested. He was taken to the police station to be interviewed. He was read his rights and then waived his right to have a lawyer present, claiming that he had nothing to hide. Daniel initially stated that he had been at the party, arriving at around 8 or 9 p.m. and leaving between 10 and 11, which would have been before Chelsea arrived. He was clear that he neither saw nor spoke to Chelsea that night. During this early part of the interview, he seemed relaxed and friendly with the interviewing officers. They went on to ask if he had ever been to the site where Chelsea's remains had been found. He acknowledged that he was aware of where she had been found, but said that he had never been there. The detective then said that they had asked everyone who they interviewed if they would consent to a DNA swab. Daniel said that he had one about a month or so ago, adding, "Yeah, bring it on, as he wanted to help in any way I can." Daniel was asked again if he believed his DNA would be on or near Chelsea's body. He remained adamant that it would not, as he had nothing to do with her disappearance. The DNA came back as a match to that found on Chelsea's leggings. Daniel's story suddenly changed. He was now saying that he might have seen her on the night in question, but still claims that they had no physical contact, and stated that he had no idea how his DNA could be a match. After further discussion, he acknowledged that he had had a sexual encounter with a woman in the back seat of his car. He said that this woman had dark hair, not blonde, and therefore couldn't be Chelsea. When he was reminded that Chelsea was wearing a wig that night, he goes on to admit that there was a possibility that the encounter could have been with her. Daniel went on to claim that when he and the woman were in the back seat of the car, someone had walked past and knocked on the window. The woman had got spooked and left, and he did not see her for the remainder of the night. Daniel said that he hadn't mentioned it previously, as the girl had red hair, so he didn't think it was relevant. Daniel continued to say that he was fairly certain the woman in question was not Chelsea, but his relaxed demeanour was beginning to change. He asked for a cigarette and a toilet break, and when he returned he proceeded to tell the officers yet another different version of events. Daniel's next claim was that after the initial encounter that he had mentioned before, he later drove away from the party and saw Chelsea walking along the side of the road. He offered her a lift and, according to him, she suggested that they continue from where they had left off. They parked up and Daniel said that she went off to go to the toilet, and as she did so, she tripped on the edge of a ditch, and it was here that he believed she may have lost her shoe. Daniel went on to say that Chelsea wanted rough sex and asked him to choke her. He obliged and then realised that she had stopped breathing. At this point he said that he had freaked out, attempted CPR, but did not really know what he was doing. He then claimed that in a daze he drove around for about 30 to 45 minutes and ended up near some train tracks about 10 miles from the party. He carried Chelsea's body into the woods where he hid it under some branches and leaves. Following his arrest, he left 2 voicemails for Jessica Priddle, with whom he had a child, saying that he was extremely sorry, that he effed up big time and was going to be gone for a really long time. He also called his current girlfriend Kelly. Kelly has since said that he confessed to the crime during that call. Daniel appeared in court on the 25th of July 2016 and was charged with second-degree murder and concealment of a body. He did not object when the prosecutor urged the judge to keep him locked up, saying that he did not want bond. At the preliminary hearing, the medical examiner stated that Chelsea had suffered an extremely violent attack and had been beaten to death with a blunt object, suffering multiple fractures to her nose, eye sockets, teeth and jaw. The medical examiner also discounted additional strangulation as the cause of death, stating that the act of killing someone takes several minutes, and even when making an allowance for the earlier injury to her nose, this would not come close to the level of injuries that Chelsea had suffered. The charge was upped to open murder. Under an open murder charge, the jury could consider a first-degree premeditated murder charge that carries a mandatory life sentence, or second-degree murder that would allow for the possibility of parole and a lesser prison term. In August of 2016, it was reported that Daniel had been arraigned on charges of first-degree criminal sexual conduct and home invasion after a woman was sexually assaulted in her Monroe County apartment. After various delays and psychiatric evaluations, Chelsea's case eventually went to trial in May 2017. It was not disputed that Daniel had killed Chelsea, but he maintained that it had been accidental. The jury didn't believe him, and on the 16th of May he was found guilty of felony murder and also concealing a death. On July the 13th he was given a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. At the hearing he apologised to Chelsea's family, stating that, "I made a mistake. I know I caused pain to the family and community. I'm truly sorry. I'm sorry for what I put you through." The following month he was sentenced to between 39 and 60 years in prison for the sexual assault in 2016. This sentence would ensure that he remained in prison should his appeal against his murder conviction be successful. His appeal was based on the fact that he believed that his DNA had been illegally used. He claimed that his rights were violated when investigators matched his DNA on Chelsea's clothing to a sample obtained by the police in another 2016 case. Daniel claimed that the sample should have been destroyed when this particular charge was dismissed. In January 2019, the appeal court upheld his conviction on the basis that a DNA sample would have been available once again when he was charged in yet another case. Daniel will remain in prison for the rest of his life. Even though his arrest and conviction will have given Chelsea's family some closure, they have had to deal with the aftermath of losing a loved one in the most horrific of circumstances. Chelsea was just 22 years old when she died. She was the youngest child born to Matthew and Leander Bruck. She had a brother, Nathaniel, and 3 sisters named Jennifer, Megan, and Cassandra. The January after she disappeared, she was due to take part in Cassandra's wedding. Chelsea attended the St Patrick Elementary School and later Monroe High School. At the time of her death, she had worked at Olga's Kitchen at the Mall of Monroe for 4 years, where her colleagues described her as outgoing, optimistic, and a jokester who was always smiling. She used to love watching movies, especially musicals, listening to music and playing video games, and before her life had been brutally cut short, she was making plans to attend Monroe Community College to earn her culinary degree. That concludes today's case. Thanks very much for listening to it. Please subscribe if you're new to the channel, and also it may pay you to click the notification button so that you don't miss out on any future notifications. Thanks very much for listening to The Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst, this week it's the Crime Reel's 5th birthday. For those that have been there from day one, thank you. And for those that have joined today, thank you. I'll be looking out for the 5Y badges on the comments. Goodbye.